Hey friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge. And today the Kubey SICARIO is on the review table. It's a pretty good size fixed blade. It's actually quite the big handle on here. But it's not extremely big or anything. We've got a fairly big knife. It has a thumb ramp, so it looks like it's upswept, but it isn't really an upswept blade. If you factor in the spine and then the blade, it's pretty much a straight back blade. We've got a gray stonewash on here. You can get it, I think, 4 different ways. G10 handle scales, stonewash, and I think there's a bead blast version of the blade, which of course I'm not going to recommend. I don't like bead blasted blades all that much. And it's D2 steel from Kubey. It's model number KU240. The price at White Mountain Knives is $69.99. Most stores are selling this for $70 American dollars. And, I'll leave links down below to make it easy for you to find this. Kubey's got a couple stores online that's selling it for $70 as well. So once you factor in the 10% discount code at White Mountain Knives, it's definitely cheaper to get this at White Mountain Knives. Free shipping within the United States and a fairly good priced shipping to Canada. So if you're looking for a big fixed blade knife and you want something that's got a nice deep, it's not exactly a full flat grind, but it's very close to being a big full flat grind. If you're interested in something like this, stick around. The full review is coming to you guys right away. Here's how it comes. First off, the sheath retention, it's quite good, but there's just a little bit of a spot there to push off with your thumb. I do prefer when they have the edge here folded out just a little bit, but it works okay. And retention's good, and it's not noisy. So that passes. We've got a taco style sheath. There's a drainage hole on this side right there, so that's a good thing. We've got a belt loop that, it helps this hang a little lower on the hip than some belt loops do. Like these Tech Lock style, they would go quite a bit lower. It does have the standard hole pattern so that you could use one of these and put this on instead if you prefer the Tech Lock style belt loops. So that's good. But yeah, it's a good belt loop. Standard size for most belts. Fit my belts just fine. It's a decent sheath. Nothing bad about it, really. Certainly nothing exceptional about it either. It's functional. And for the knife, what do we got? I'm calling it basically a straight back knife. We do have a bit of a thumb riser here and then it comes back down again, but mostly it's the straight back of the blade is in line with most of the straight back of the handle. It's a pretty thick blade, 5 millimeters. I'll put all the measurements later on in the video in metric and in standard imperial measurements as well. It's a big chunky piece of steel here. For the designing, we've got swedges here on the thumb riser. The swedges go through the G10. Straight back, we got some swedging back here on the end of the handle. Quite nice lanyard hole that goes all the way through, of course. Nice chamfered G10. We've got T8 screws on here. These handles don't really match exactly. They match, but not exactly. If you rub your thumbnail across or your fingernail across, it catches in a number of places. It's like this piece of G10 has been twisted just a little bit, so it hasn't been made exactly right. The one on this side fits very well, so it's not that big a deal. Back to the blade, we've got a little bit of a swedge here, and then the swedge ends, and then it comes down to the tip. We've got a big flat section here, and There's the flat comes all the way up to about where my finger is right there. So it's not technically a full flat grind, but it's pretty close to that. We've got Kubey's brand name right there, just where I like to have it, in a great size. And on this side, it says D2 right in there. The blade's got this gray wash on it, then a stone wash finish. Really nice. It is sharpened now. I recorded the introduction, this section of the video, and I recorded the whole video actually, and then I went and sharpened the knife. So right now it's got a nice mirror edge on it. But when I did most of the video, it didn't have that. I didn't realize it until I went to edit it, that this section of the video, the audio just didn't work. So I'm re-recording this now. The sharpening from the factory was not that good, and I'll show you that when I go through the measurements. We've got a sharpener's choil that it's quite odd. It's wide this way, but shallow this way. It's not all that helpful. Even when I sharpened the knife just this first time, I couldn't help but touch the plunge just a little bit. There's a spot right there that I touched the plunge a little bit. The whole purpose of the sharpener's choil, or the main purpose of the sharpener's choil, is so that you don't run into the plunge when you sharpen your knife, and it keeps a nice, clean, crisp edge, easy to sharpen. So I wish the sharpener's choil would have been deeper up into the blade. It's chamfered around here on the blade. It's chamfered up here on where it's the full thickness. And then after that, where the swedge is and stuff, you know, of course, all the chamfering is gone because the swedge is basically a form of chamfering. The blade is quite thick right behind the tip, so it's a very strong blade. You know, I did the plunge test where I plunged it into wood and pried it over, and yeah, no problems at all doing that. There's no damage to the tip at all. I did do some outdoor type of work, but in the house, it's just way too cold right now. This swedge right here that makes it narrower, it did impact the batoning a little bit, in that the baton that I used deteriorated more quickly, I believe, than it would have if it would have been the full thickness all the way along, you know, because it gets thinner here. And if you hit back here a little bit, yeah, not a big deal. It did do batoning fairly well. Of course, I don't use a knife for batoning very much. You take a hatchet. That's because I do car camping. I can't walk far enough to do walk in the woods type camping. But sometimes for kindling, you know, do a bit of batoning, and it works okay for that. Feather stick making, not great. Wasn't terrible, of course. It just wasn't all that great. It was okay as a sort of outdoorsman's type of knife. Certainly not a bushcrafting knife, but in a pinch, it can do a lot of those tasks. Overall, a decent blade shape. Works good for piercing, not too big a stuff, but does okay. And, you know, slicing and cutting, it did, okay, not great. And I think that's because it's too thick behind the grind. If they would have made it thinner behind the grind and did a better job sharpening it, it would have done those things better. So, actually, I'll put on the screen. I'll test again after I finish recording this how well it's doing after I sharpened it, and I'll put that on the screen. So the blade shape is okay. The design is actually quite nice. We get to the handle, and it's basically a straight back handle. It comes down a little bit. And then we've got the handle for the belly, and then sort of a divider between the index finger and the rest of the hand. It's not that great feeling, actually. The layout is okay. It's just a little too big. This is for men's extra large hands and bigger. And my hands are just barely into the extra large range. And it's still not that comfortable. And it's because it's too blocky. It looks like it's got a really nice shape to it, you know, because there is a little bit of a crown right here. It is rounded, but only ever so slightly. And then the edges here are just a little bit rounded over. So, but basically it's, you know, flat, straight edge, flat, straight edge. It's just not that comfortable. Also, it's thinner here and it gets wider at the back. That's kind of good. I think if somebody buys this knife, be prepared to do some sanding on this G10 to make it a little more comfortable, to bring this down a little bit so that at the edge here, it gets thinner. You know, leave this fullness along the middle here, but sort of make the handle a little more rounded. You know, don't make it round, of course, but a little more rounded, and then it would be more comfortable, I'm sure. And that's something that most people can do at home. G10 is not that hard to sand. Just wear a mask because glass fibers that are in here are really bad for lungs. So the overall shape of this thing, design of this thing is actually pretty good. The execution has several minor things that I think overall add up to not being quite good enough, but you'll be able to make up your own mind. Let's take this thing apart now. We'll see how these screws are, and they look good right now, but we'll try to take it apart and see. I had to put it in a vise to hold it because this was free spinning, so I have to put a screwdriver on either side, and that's how I'm able to loosen this off. I wasn't able to do it before. I already pre-loosened this before I turned on the recording of that, and that's because, yeah, oh, there's Loctite in that screw, so I'll have to do the other one as well. These screws are not terribly well made. There's a lot of play. That's a little more than it really is. Let's do it on this side. There's a fair bit of play in them, so that's not very good. So you're going to want to get the best fitting screws. Maybe use Drive Grip. It's anti-cam out fluid. A little bit of oil on there. Not much skeletonizing in there. I wish they would have made these holes a little bit larger. That would bring the balance point, you know, I would like it to be right underneath that finger. So I wish the balance point was right here instead of right here. Like that's probably 3/8 of an inch over a little bit. You know, it'll be a tiny bit lighter that way too. Let's take this out. There we go. So it's just a pin that screws in from either side. That's how they put it together. All right, the measurements. How heavy is this thing? 293 grams, which is 10.35 ounces. The sheath is 75 grams, that's 2.65 ounces. So together, 368 grams, 13 ounces is what you're carrying. The sharpness out of the box, 140 bests. Now that's pretty much average for the knives I review. They got lucky with that, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. The cutting edge length is 124.3 millimeters, 4.89 inches. Blade length tip to the G10, the closest, 132.1 millimeters, 5.2 inches. The thickness of the blade is 5 millimeters, 0.197 of an inch. The blade depth, the widest point, is right at the heel of the blade because it's coming down from this thumb riser. So that is 37.6 millimeters, which is 1.48 inches. How thin or thick is it behind the grind? I measured in several places. It's an averaged of 0.74 millimeters, which is 29 thousandths of an inch. So that's almost 50% thicker than I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be 20 thousandths, not 30, and it's almost 30. The grind angles. This side has an average of 22.5 degrees. This side's got an average of 25.5 degrees. So it's way too much of a blunt angle coming out. Measured, it started at 27.9 degrees, so basically 28 degrees, 25.6, 24.3, 24.2. And that's how we got the average of 25.5. This side started at 23, went to 24.5, went back to 23 and ended at 19.7. So this side was sharpened a bit better, but it was not sharpened well. The handle length, 125 millimeters, 4.92, so basically 5 inches. Not quite 5 inches in the grip. That is about 10.5 centimeters, 4.1 inches roughly. The thickness of the handle, it started at 14.4 millimeters, which is 0.567 of an inch. It ended at 19.2 millimeters, 0.756, so 3/4 of an inch back here. The handle depth within the grip area, its biggest right here, that is 32.5 millimeters, 1.28 inches. The total length of this knife from tip to end, 257.3 millimeters, which is 10.13 inches. So that's the standards. That's how big they made it and all the specs on it. What do I think of this knife? I'm not all that fond of it. I think we can do better for the price, although the price is very good. You're getting a pretty big, chunky knife for, under 70 bucks. So you're getting, a big chunk of steel for that price. It's just not made up to snuff, I think. You can do the work on the handle scales to make the handles more comfortable. You should resharpen all your knives anyway. And so you could get a good angle on here, but you can't get away with how thick it is on this blade. Every single time you sharpen it, it's going to get thicker behind the grind. And you just can't change that. Problems? Not really. It's not one big problem. It's just the number of those little things, like how thick it is behind the grind. The sharpness toil's not that great. And the handle it's okay, but there's nothing special or really good about this knife. It's just a reasonable knife for the price. Now, in and of itself, if you had to choose between this knife and no knife, of course this knife's good. But there's a lot of other knives that there are to choose from. And while I am a big fan of Kubey, I really like what they're doing. They've got a number of great folding knives that I really like. I think they're missing the mark on their fixed blades. I've reviewed one of their other, is it one or two of their other fixed blades, and I had the same kind of feeling about that fixed blade as I do about this one. And basically the feeling is, you could have done better. You should have done better. And that's my feeling on this knife from Kubey. Is it bad? No. Is it good? I wish. It's okay. But these days, okay just doesn't cut it anymore. There's too many good knives out there. But there might be the odd person who's looking for exactly this. And if that's you, you can buy this one off me. I will be doing a knife sale very soon. This knife will not be on that knife sale, just on the tiny chance that my Patreon winner or YouTube member winner at the end of the month chooses this knife. What I'm talking about is I do a giveaway to my financial supporters every single month. One of those winners is randomly drawn, and they get to pick one of the knives that I reviewed in the previous month, and I send it to them. I do ask them to pay for the shipping, but I send them the knife. I do a custom sharpening job on it, whatever knife they choose. And, and in case that person chooses this one won't be available to sell to anybody until at least March sometime at the soonest. So, the Kubey SICARIO. Thanks for watching my video. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And remember, friends, cut towards your chum, not your thumb. Bye for now.